We're back with another episode of the Gay Tennis Podcast. I'm Tony, and today I am welcoming back someone who inspires me. He's the creator of chart-topping Substack Bounces and author of a book with an extremely long title. I do remember that it's about Naomi Osaka, but I don't know the entire thing. Please welcome back Ben Rothenberg.
Thank you, Tony. That's more than enough. Naomi Osaka as the title is great. That suffices. If you search for Naomi Osaka on wherever you get your books, you'll find it eventually, I'm sure.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate it. Having you back, this made me think of that book and when you came on the first time and how nervous I was. So I just want to start by thanking you. The first time you came on it's like been like 2 years now. And I was like so extremely nervous. It was a huge get for us. And I was so appreciative that you came on. So I'm glad to have you back.
Well, I'm glad to be back. I feel like this is a huge get for me to finally get a return invitation to your booming show full of all sorts of, increasing level of celebrity and your huge Instagram presence. I was saying on the phone, we were talking earlier yesterday or whatever it was, like you have like safely 20 times roughly my Instagram follower count. You are a king of social media and finding an audience and finding your tribe out there. And so it's been very cool to watch you flourishing in this space. So congratulations on everything you've built with this podcast in the 2 years since we last did this.
Oh my gosh, I really appreciate it. And what's really fun is that we have you here to talk about Heated Rivalry, which is taking over the world, it seems. But I want to start because you do have your Substack. I know you also do work for Second Serve, and you recently shared an article called "The Top 25 Matches of the Century So Far." And as you know, anytime you release a piece of content like this, the immediate reaction, at least from toxic gays like me, is to go through and nitpick and say what you forgot and what you should have included. So I want to start with this article.
From the response, I hardly think that was I don't think any one category can claim that. Everyone loves to nitpick a list, and everyone likes to be like, how could you forget this? And actually, there's probably like a broier version of tennis fandom that's even more up in arms about, an erasure of various big three matches that we did in this list. So the gays have not been the worst in terms of the pitches and the torches and pitchforks so far.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to see what I can to make that worse for you because there are a couple of matches that I was surprised to not see. Hopefully, I'm not going to be as bad as any bros, but there was a match that I was looking for involving Maria Sharapova and Justine Henin from a WTA finals, maybe
Madrid.
Was it Madrid?
Yes, so this was on my list of nominees. Thank you for saying this. You're validating me. So the way the sausage was made for this, David Shaftel, who is the creator and editor and everything, a honcho of Second Serve, formerly with Racket, before the Racket breakup, he put together just sort of a list of his sort of contributors and other people he likes to know in tennis to come up with their own long list of submissions. And so the list kept kind of getting narrowed down. I probably submitted something like 40 matches or something for consideration. There were some that I'm sure were unique to me. Some that were very obvious picks, and then it went from like 40 to or 70 to like 40, and then we picked each of our five. And I know at some point, certainly on one of my lists, that Sharapova Henin was there. I remember that match well. It was an indoor year-end championship. Yes. It must have been 2007 when it was in Madrid. Sharapova was wearing this shirt that was like this like pale pink with a bow. She looked like she was an Amish school teacher or something. And it was a great match. It was like Henin was on top of the world. She just won US Open. And then a couple months after that, they met again in the quarterfinals, I think, of Australian Open, and Sharapova clobbered her and ended like a 30-something, I want to say, match win streak for Henin. Maybe that really kind of ended Justine bluntly. I mean, like that was kind of the takedown match. That AO quarterfinal was one of the first sort of nails in Justine's coffin of her original run as the alpha on tour. So that was a great match. There's so many. I had so many deep cuts that people hopefully on here will appreciate. Lots of deep WTA cuts. I'm going to shout out one in particular, which was like the most hipster pick, I feel like, although for me it's canonical. It was Zvonareva and Meskina in San Diego in 2004. I don't know if you're aware of this one.
Oh, listen, I used to say that my game reminded like Meskina is who I used to feel like I played like when I was younger in high school. So yes, I'm very familiar.
Yes, so they played this like incredible match that went to like third set tiebreak. I think it was like 17-15, I want to say, in that third set tiebreak. It was nuts. It was an all-time great match, and there's great pixelated footage on YouTube somewhere. And I voted for that, but it did not get through. I got a few of my picks in.
I know.
And
Can
the
I
way they
tell
also
you?
divided it up. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let me just tell you. First of all, anytime we start a podcast with a term ending "nin," I'm in and having a great time, especially if Maria Sharapova is on the other side of the net. Second of all, I'm assuming there was Zvonareva tears in that match against Meskina. Just a guess.
I would assume so. Through the
And
pixels, I'm sure you could see tears or imagine them at least. Yes.
yes, I will be looking. And the third thing I was going to say was I know, like, you know how I like to prove to you how much I listen to NCR every time we talk? There was a match that you talked about constantly. And it was, I think, was it in Australia? And it made the list. And I know it was yours. Was it, hold on, now I'm blanking. I'm going to go back and find it. Do you know what I'm talking about? It was like a
It's a men's
men's
match,
match.
right?
Yeah, wasn't
Yes. This
Baghdatis,
was
was
this
it?
was that no, this made it to number 24 on the list, which I appreciate them
Yes.
throwing a bone. And I think there's something also, there's like an art to list making if you're doing it for a publication to get conversation going. And you don't want like 7 Federer Nadal matches or 7 Nadal Djokovic matches on there. It's not interesting.
It
So they did
was,
do a good job
yes.
spreading the variety. And one of the early picks was one of my favorite matches I've ever watched, and I still watch like the YouTube highlights, and they're so great so quickly. It was a third round match of the 2012 Australian Open between Alexander Dolgopolov and Bernard Tomic, both of whom problematic in their own ways that we don't need to get into. But
Yes.
they played this match that was just like, I think I said my little blurb about it. That was like watching. Have you ever seen those pictures of like when they give different drugs to spiders and the kind of webs they weave after taking different drugs? Like you'll get like
No,
you could
but
give a
I need to
spider
look
a
that up.
drop of cocaine or something. It'll have like a really intense, really tightly knit web or something. And this is like I describe this as being like the spider on LSD web, like all these weird curves and spins. And the match was like constant slices and junk balling and all sorts of stuff. They were just like playing this like weird artsy tennis for like, and it went on for 5 sets, but it wasn't like, oh my god, this match is epic because it's long. Like so, often people say with men's matches. I saw a recent comment of yours on some social media about, did anyone really watch the entire French Open final? For the men
Yes.
this year, I was in the stands. I did have to take a break at some point to go like use the restroom, 4 hours in or something, and get
Right.
some coffee or whatever I was doing. But yeah, but it is really, really long. And so, but this one was, if you watch the YouTube highlights, which I think are embedded in that article, right away you'll just see this is like, it does not look like normal tennis. It's just like two guys bringing like a spoons to a gunfight. Like they're just playing this like dinky little slicey tennis, and it's crazy and it's a lot of fun. So that was my one men's pick that made it in, and then I had a few more women's matches I wrote about. Oh no, actually I got assigned Kaboli Bergs, which I think a few people picked, but I did write about that, and I wrote about Bergs's TikTok, which I think is foundational for understanding that match, and then. I wrote about Halep Davis, which was an epic women's match, Australia 2018.
Yes.
Very lightweight battle between two short queens. And then I did Osaka Brady in the US Open semis in
Uh
2020 was the other one I did, which
Osaka
was great.
Brady was so good. That whole 2020 semifinal night was so good. And I remember, I
Mm-hmm.
think the Lauren Davis one was the one where Roger Federer was watching from a screen in the locker room, and that was like when they first started showing people, like players
Oh,
in the back of, like when they think they're not being watched.
I think you're really close. I think that was actually an earlier Lauren Davis match. I want to say. I think
Oh,
she was. It was like
Was it
maybe that was
Sharapova?
like Davis Sharapova.
Yeah,
I
you're
want to say it was
right.
Davis Sharapova
You're
some
right.
earlier year. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was Federer and it was this like totally like horrible eavesdropping that I've written about for Australia. How they have these cameras and they catch people who did not realize they're on camera. And that one had audio too, so you could see
Yes.
because they were like waiting to go on next on Laver, I think, and like Sharapova like blows a match point and you hear like Federer and a Dimitrov, whoever else is like sitting gathered, like saying like cursing, like come on, like what? Let's go,
Yeah.
let's hurry up. Like they're getting mad. Understandably, they want to play. They're getting mad at this match. They're like riding it, but not being entirely complimentary of the women who are on screen. But how would they ever know that? That they would be, audio piped in. And so I guess it's just a lesson that we don't always know what happens in the locker rooms of these sports when these men are behind closed doors,
I
into
was
the shower room or wherever else.
I was just about to say,
To try to segue.
speaking of people getting angry, people have probably seen the title of this episode and they're like, we're what,
Mm-hmm.
8, 9 minutes in, and you have not mentioned the word Ilya Rozanov yet, and I'm annoyed. So Ben,
Well,
I
it's
think
the flip of your previous episodes where you talk about it a little bit at the beginning, then move on to something else. This is the opposite.
exactly.
This is the warm up. And actually, I feel like by this time in episode 1 of Heated Rivalry, they're probably already hooking up. Like it
Oh,
happens so fast. In the
immediately.
That's one of the things that's most notable about it to me is like there's so little like buildup. Like the heat is instant heat. It's a gas stove. You heat it, it's on flame immediately. Like there's no preheating for this rivalry. It goes really fast once they decide to turn things on.
It does come fast, especially Rosenoff in the shower seems to come very quickly. But yes, it is hot and heavy from the beginning. So let's actually start from the beginning. What are your, well, first of all, we are going to have spoilers in this episode. So if for some reason you haven't seen it, we're going to have spoilers, but neither Ben nor I have read the books or plan on reading the books. So this is just based on the show. We just wanted to come on here. Listen, it's a gay sports podcast. We're going to talk about it. It's taken over my whole life for the last several weeks. So I'm really excited to have Ben here to talk about it. Let's talk overall thoughts, Ben. I know it gets hot and heavy early. What are some of your, now that we're a few days out from the finale, what are your big takeaways from the show?
Yeah, I think there's a whole arc and how people there's definitely a journey that this show hits, and the show hits while being fairly solidly in the romance genre. It does hit several very different moods and tones and paces throughout its only 6 episodes, and each of the 6 episodes has a fairly distinct flavor or vibe to it. I think. I went back just because I knew we were going to record this. I watched most of the first episode again just to refresh myself. It had been 6 weeks or so since I had seen it first time, and the first episode is very sex heavy. There are sex scenes early and often, and they're long and they're detailed and they're sort of they keep going. That's one of the things people reacted to first in the show. When the show came out, it was like, oh my gosh, this is porn. This is hockey smut. This is these long sex scenes that you don't usually see on TV shows in terms of them lasting that long. I saw a clip from, because this show has taken over, like probably you've said too, like my entire social media algorithm for a while. I was getting on any app, it was just like they realized I was clicking on this. I'm a big hockey person too, so we can talk about that also in the context of this show. So all the hockey parts of my algorithm were also clicking onto this as well. So it was a real, avalanche of this stuff that's hitting my feed. And there was a joke I saw at some point from Louis Vertel on his podcast. He was saying like, the thing with this show is they're having sex and then it fades out into black and it fades right back into them in another position. Like they keep going. Like it's really like they're not, that is like the action or the story or the plot or the character development of this show happens in the sex scenes in a lot of the early episodes. And that is really rare and interesting. And then as the show goes on, the short sex scenes are much shorter in the second half of the season for sure. And it's much more about their emotions and they're talking more and they're, having these more, romance or formalizing a relationship and getting to know each other. And so it definitely does hit different sorts of modes and gears. And it kind of hooks you, I think, early on with all the sex, with the, relatively explicit sex scenes, with the, the butts on screen. The butts went viral very quickly from these two actors, especially Connor Story, I think it's fair to say. And and so they that was what gets you, but then you kind of, if you stay with it past that, then it becomes this like emotionally resonant, stories of coming out and family relationships and all sorts of different kinds and cultural differences between Canada, I guess, and Russia, and yeah, it becomes this much sort of richer text. And I think that's from what I understand of the books, I think that's a lot of that has to do, those things were in the books largely, but I think the way it was the showrunner Jacob Tierney, who I have watched Letterkenny, which was his first sitcom that he directed, or he was one of the creators of, and it's a great show. It's a completely different show tonally, much more sort of goofy, lowbrow sitcom in a lot of ways. But there's a lot of craft and a lot of skill with which a lot of these notes are hit, and I think they get hit really satisfyingly and cleanly and resonantly in a lot of different ways in the show. So I was just like, for it being introduced as like, the smut hockey show, like I do think like it kind of sneaks up on you with its quality through its like kind of obscure origins of being this sort of like erotica book, really, not something we think of as being high culture, highbrow culture on any level. I do think that the performances and the direction and the cinematography, dare say, of this show are all surprisingly solid and great. And it's clearly a low budget show. I can talk, we get a little bit maybe later. There's a couple moments where I feel like that did hold it back a little bit in the last episode I can get to. But yeah, overall, I was just really impressed. I just think this show was better than it had any right to be in a lot of ways. And it's become this real earned, genuine hit. And these two guys have become breakout stars from it, even passing your follower count on Instagram, which is amazing.
It's just barely at 1 million, I think.
Barely.
Yeah, wow, there's a lot to unpack there. I will say, first of all, when you talk about the algorithm, I was trying to think of a show or something comparable where literally you're right, it's Instagram, it's Twitter, it's anything. My entire feed is flooded with this information. I mean, not since I was thinking like the Traders when Phaedra first started blowing up on like season 2 of the Traders, it seemed like for those moments they would go and take over my entire feed, but then it was kind of fleeting, right? Like it would come and go. But this has been constant for like over a month. I was like maybe early seasons White Lotus a couple of moments, but it just feels like there's one scene or like a couple of moments, not the entire show, different things that are being hit on, like you said. Like there are just so many things that I think people are latching onto. Of course, like it's hot and sexy, but like the performances are amazing. There are all of these real moments. I feel like it almost hits like nostalgia in a weird way, in a way that like you you also like I can see so much of myself in the past, but then it also feels very current. I don't know. It's something that I was shocked at how much I honestly it has taken over my life. And I was thinking about
Yeah.
recently how horrible I felt like kind of emotionally in 2025. I feel like 2025 was not my year. But I was thinking back and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, listen, it started with a Madison Keys iconic, like all timer run in Australia. And now for the last
Mm-hmm.
month, we've had Lily Allen's album, which I can't stop listening to, and Heated Rivalry. So I'm kind of like, maybe if I just forget everything in between, 2025 was actually a wonderful year for me. And I think that's how I'm going to look at it.
We can do a separate West End Girl spinoff episode from this episode as well, because I've been very into that as well. I'm seeing her live in Brooklyn. I'm excited about next year. I
I
got tickets to that, so very, very. That was an ordeal getting those tickets, but got them. So
was going to say,
pleased
I
with
haven't been
that.
able
Yeah,
to
that
get them
that's
yet.
been great. Yeah, hopefully I think she's gonna add more dates. I imagine, like, because it was like the third show attempted to get tickets to is this Brooklyn show. Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the nostalgia, one thing I mentioned, and in my notes about things I thought were strong in the show, I really like that as the timeline progressed. The show starts I think 2008, 2009, and then
Mm-hmm.
goes through. I think the season ends around 2017. So like 9 years in this time they do a really good job of keeping the cell phone technology current to the time. So they start off with
Mm,
like Blackberries and like other sorts of not flip phones, but T9 Word, whatever kind of phones, Nokia type phones
yeah.
at that time, and then eventually they get towards iPhones and later iPhones as they're going. So that was like one of the things. It was like a detail that you might not expect a show like this to do right. Like I actually was watching One Battle After Another, and I've been trying. I don't know if you've seen One Battle After Another,
Mm-mm.
but it's streaming on HBO also now I think, and not a major plot point, but like there's like a beginning, and then it jumps ahead like 15, 16 years to a later point, and in both sides of the jump, they're using iPhones. Their iPhones on
Mm.
screen, and so I was like, "What is the timeline? Like, when is this movie? When is it starting? When is it beginning?" So like I was sort of tripped up by that a little bit. But this show, attention to detail, and a lot of things like that are really good. So I understand the nostalgia and the anytime you hear Tattoo playing for me, it's
Oh,
a very specific kind of nostalgia.
God. Yeah, the music is everything. I mean, and you talked about the sex scenes, and I do feel like that's what brings people in, and I do want to talk about like the chemistry in between these
Mm-hmm.
characters, but not for me since Queer as Folk have I seen a show that really leaned into like the long sex scenes and almost character development, like you were saying, like building characters through these sex scenes. Like you learned so much about the people through these scenes. And I don't know. I
Mm-hmm.
do feel like there was a piece of this, like one of my pieces of feedback, which I know I have like to talk about later, is that annoyed me was that I feel like after like the first couple episodes, everyone was like, "Oh my god, this is just porn. This is hot." Whereas I was like, "Yeah, but there are all these little details of things like you can tell by the way like Ilya's talking to him during sex and like the way things are happening on this show where it's clearly more than just like sex." But then as the season went on, all of a sudden when the sex went away, people were like, "Oh my god, this show is so high quality and so good," and blah 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 blah. I'm like, can't you have a very high quality show that is also very sex forward and like focusing on gay sex and it being a good positive thing? So that annoyed me a little bit about how everyone was like, "Oh my god, this show got so good once the sex scene started being less." I'm like, sorry, this show was amazing from literally minute one.
I think the show is I think the show is flexing different muscles, let's say, and the beginning was
Mm.
all ass muscles. Like basically that
And
was
some
like here. It
chest.
was like really
Okay.
like look at. look at this. And honestly, like that ass and the chest and the whole Ilya Rozanov Connor Story's body is actually important, like the credibility of the show. He looks like a pro hockey player, right? More
Mm,
so build wise than Hudson Williams. There are players who are smaller in slider and build who are not like super ripped, but he looks like what you think a pro hockey player looks like. Like
mm.
he like anatomically looks like what it looks like. I've been in hockey locker rooms many times, including NHL. Like as a reporter, I know what these players look like. It looks like closer to that. I was never sure. I was interested how tall they were. I thought they both might be fairly short. But I think I saw some interviews. I've seen lots of interviews at this point where Connor Story says he's 5'11", so I think they're about the same height. I don't know if that's his real height or what he says on camera as his height, but they're not like big, huge guys. And a lot of NHL players are. Some of them are over 6 feet tall, but they're not like tennis players now, where they're all 6'5", 6'6" at the top of the game, largely. Yeah, so that those visuals are important to the story. Like they were saying, I've seen clips of this or all kind of blurs together, but I think Jacob Tierney was saying, the creator, like it was for casting, it had to be fairly specific. It had to look like someone who looks like they could be a pro athlete in this show that looks like requires a lot of nudity and the body being front and center, and also is willing to do these extended gay sex scenes. And that's not all actors. That those are two things that are like going to narrow the herd fairly quickly for people who are under consideration for these roles. And they
God, to
achieved that, and
be
the casting was really good. And I think they did a great job with both leads. And I think they both really had very deserved star turns out of this.
to be the casting director of this show, I think that honestly, like what you're saying, it makes me think a lot about Connor's Story because I'm like, in the show, he really pulls off the attitude and everything that comes along with being Ilya.
Mm-hmm.
And if you see any interviews with him, it's very easy to tell how good of an actor he is because he's basically like a theater gay, is how he comes across in
Yeah.
interviews. Is like a
Mm-hmm.
nerdy theater gay. And I'm not saying he is or isn't, whatever. I know they're not talking about their sexuality, but like that's the vibe he gives off. And then in the show,
Mm-hmm.
he's like this dom top Russian guy with like, who's like keeping his feelings very underneath. So I'm like, wow, okay. It doesn't take long to figure out how good of an actor Connor Story is. But okay, you mentioned hockey a little bit, and I think even
Yeah.
people who follow you closely with the tennis world don't know that you have a history of hockey. So talk a little bit about what you know from hockey relating to the show, and then I have like 4 or 5 random hockey questions I want to get into.
Yeah, hockey was my main sport growing up. Hockey was my first love in sports. It was a sport that I watched the most of for sure. My dad was a hockey fan as well as a Philadelphia Flyers fan. So you maybe can see on my video window here
Oh
in our chat,
yeah.
there's some Flyer, old posters or logos or something on the corner of my room here. Um, yeah, so that's been a huge part of my life. Like I was growing up as a hockey fan and wanted to be a hockey player and started playing hockey or skating and then started playing hockey, I think when I was 8. And I really wanted to be a goalie. A lot of my favorite players were goalies, and I was into goalies, so I became a goalie when I was 9 or so, and I played hockey, seriously or consistently throughout all the way through my teens, all the way through my senior year of high school. I played varsity hockey for my high school for 4 years,
Wait, where did you grow up?
and that in DC, Washington DC.
Oh,
So
you grew up in
not a
DC.
traditional hockey market
I
at
was
that
gonna
point,
say.
but it was growing. It's gotten bigger certainly since the Caps got better. Alexander Ovechkin, who was drafted by the Caps in 04 or 05, who I feel like a lot of Rosenhoff is this is a little, I don't know how people talk about this, but to me there was some clear, the sort of two peers from the sort of 2000s through the 2010s who were the top rivalry of individuals in hockey were Alex Ovechkin, who's a Russian guy who played for Washington, and Sidney Crosby, who's a Canadian who played for Pittsburgh Penguins. And they were sort of the two
Mhm.
faces and two stars of the league. And I could see you can sort of squint and see some parts of Hollander and Rosenhoff in Crosby and Ovechkin. So I did see that I'm sure that was a comp. I'm sure people have talked about that before who know hockey. Yeah, but I played hockey for a long time, and it was, and I really became a tennis fan more when I was going into college, and then stopped playing hockey. Actually brought my hockey equipment. I was a goalie, so I had a ton of equipment, all these pads. I brought
Yeah.
them to my first semester of college. I went to the University of Michigan, and then just like basically I would have needed a car to be able to keep playing hockey. The rinks where like the club team or whatever played were like really far away, or there was no like easy intramurals, and so it didn't work out. And so I only have played, I know, some handful of times since high school in the end, when there have been alumni games from my high school or one or two like pickup games. But I would love to keep playing. I'm sure like now 20 years removed, I'm 38 now from my hockey heyday. Like I'm sure I would like break in half or like tear my hamstring immediately if I tried playing like I used to. But I did play for a long time, and it was great, and it was a really cool sport. And also from the context of this show and what we're going to talk about, like culturally, it was a very male, very masculine, very traditional space to be in for a long
Yeah.
time. And not in a different way than tennis for sure. Like even, because I was on the tennis team also, and just the sort of the kids on the
Okay,
tennis team versus
two-sport
the kids on
athlete
the
slay.
three. I was
Oh,
also terrible at cross country. That was my third sport, which
okay,
is almost not. I
excuse.
was not anywhere near varsity on that, but I was not fast. But I needed my school. I went to an all boys school, and we had required sports. You had to do sports
Oh
every
my
season,
god.
and so it was very much a certain kind of place and that energy. And I was incredibly good at two of them. Like, and I was way better. To be clear, I was way better at hockey as an athlete than I was at tennis. I was legitimately good at hockey. Tennis, I was mediocre. And I was like a pusher, a junk baller, and so I was like frustrating and useless at doubles. We could do singles okay. Anyway, but for
We
hockey, I was
celebrate
good, and for
them.
hockey, I could hold my own, and loved it, and yeah. But it was definitely culturally, a space where, especially as you got older, you get to be more of teenage boys or high school age. Like there are certainly cultural things about it, and deeply, to say the least, heteronormative space, and very masculine and testosterone in lots of different ways with teenage boys, especially in all boys school. I'm sure adds to that in certain ways. And so yeah, it was a space where but it was also like part of me. Like I grew up as a hockey fan. I was not pretending to be anything as a hockey player. It was very much authentically part of who I was, and it was not always the easiest to marry or mesh with other parts. I mean, my school, in terms of like, there was zero out kids in my school of like 300 people when I was there and graduated. I graduated in '05. So like
Yeah,
it just wasn't a thing at that point, and which I'm sure has changed in the last 20 years. I know it's changed at
right.
that school, but it was just a different time in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
I
Got
guess
an all-boys
Rosenoff and Hollander
school.
maybe are about. There's Rosenoff and Hollander, I guess, are probably, they get drafted in '08. Probably it's like 18 or 19-year-olds. So they were probably supposed to be about 3 years younger than me. So relatively similar ages. But yeah, I mean, hockey, and I know this from people from teammates I had in high school who did play even more serious hockey, who play what they call it a few different names for it, but either junior hockey or travel hockey, whatever you want to call it. Basically,
Yeah.
who are much more invested in it, who are much more on like a possible pro or like D1 college track for hockey. Like there was like, yeah, a very sort of a certain kind of like frattiness to the hockey culture of teenage boys, including a lot of like the fratty sort of ways that from the outside would look very homoerotic, very like doing like bets and running like naked
Oh
sprints
my
on the
god,
ice if you lose a
stop.
bet or something like that, or running around the building in the middle of whatever. Like those are like stories that definitely exist, and
Happened.
lots of locker room nudity hijinks, whatever else, teabagging people. I mean, who knows? Like there's lots of
Oh
different
my
stuff
god,
that would
stop.
happen
Not teabagging.
in those
Not
spaces.
teabagging.
No,
But here's the
this
thing.
is like legitimately what was going on.
Okay, no, that's good information. So, just so you know, I'm
Yeah.
Pittsburgh trash. I was born in Pittsburgh. My parents were huge Penguins fans.
Okay.
I think I tried to play like once and it was a disaster and I never went back. So that's where I went to soccer
It's
and
hard.
tennis. I was also a two-sport athlete. Thank you. But okay,
Good
so
for you.
you have a legitimate background in hockey and and by the way, like
Mm-hmm.
in a true locker room, because in tennis we, at least when I played, like we didn't really have true locker room experiences like I think a lot of other sports, like team sports. I know football at my high
Yeah.
school did. um so let me just go through and ask you some hockey questions that I came up with, because it is
Okay.
impressive that you have such a background. First of all, are hockey players as rich as Ilya and Shane seem to be? Even in the top of the NHL, are they that rich?
Yes, definitely. I
Wow,
mean,
okay.
look. I can look up like I'll just quickly Google like a salary of a top player, like Connor McDavid, who's the biggest star. He gets 12.5 million annually, and he probably has a contract.
Okay.
He got a 2-year extension. So yeah, so comparable with top tennis players for sure. And actually, and the difference between tennis is that like everyone in hockey on the 20-player roster of an NHL team is making some seven-figure amount, or maybe eight at the top per year
Okay.
in there. So there's 20 players per team, 30 teams in the league, I think still maybe 32. So it's about 600 people each making some millions of dollars. Yeah,
Wow.
big four sports pay a lot of money. There's definitely money, and also definitely Hollander. We don't hear about Rosenoff's endorsements as much, but Hollander has like a Reebok deal. He has a Rolex deal. He has other things going on, and so he's definitely got income there's a montage of him doing commercials at some point. Like, he's making money. He's doing well for himself. He'd
Okay.
probably be somewhere on like a Forbes top 100 athletes list.
Okay. I didn't realize that. To me, I just kept thinking like, God, is hockey that popular that they're that rich? But I guess they are.
It's a legit Big Four sport. It sells out arenas, and yeah, it's real.
Okay. How common is what I've dubbed the bottom stretch on the ice, the kind of frog style stretch that Shane does a lot? Is that as common as they make it seem on this show?
Yes, and I definitely did a lot of that. I was a goalie, so I had very flexible
Okay, come on,
hips,
hips.
groin, whatever you want to say, as a teen. I actually tried in Rome one year when I was at the tournament. I was like, I wonder if I can like still do a splits. And the answer was definitely no. Like, at some point in my mid late 20s, I tried, and it was sore for days, if not weeks, after attempting the splits in the Rome press room. Yes, yeah, flexibility for sure. And the other thing that's also, maybe this is related, but there's like, it's like a trope, but it's real, about like hockey butts. Hockey players have huge
Mhm.
thighs, big butts, lots of lower body strength, not huge always upper bodies, especially goalies. Goalies, and I was a goalie, tend to have really kind of under, not super muscular top halves of their body, not a lot of upper body strength, because everything's in the legs for a goalie. Basically, you're just moving around, getting up and down, and there's no real benefit to having a lot of muscle up top.
It makes
But
sense.
lower body strength in hockey is very real.
It makes sense that goalies would be built like bottoms, to me, because they're playing defense the whole time. So I get it. Okay. Is homophobia as severe as it seems in the show in real life? Like, with hockey, like in the NHL, in hockey, I know you were kind of touching on it a little bit. Is homophobia as bad as it seems on this show?
I don't know how bad it seems on the show. I might want to ask you that, because I don't think it was super bad in the show. Really, clearly they feel like reluctant to come out, but there's not like a ton. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but I don't remember like a ton of atmospheric or ambient homophobia on Heated Rivalry. Was there? I mean, there certainly, there was
No,
like a comment from the guy at the Olympics about the figure skater, like, oh, it must be like, knowing a figure skater who's gay, whatever, ooh, or something. But
no, no,
like,
no. Even that was
I mean,
positive. No,
yeah,
there was no like out. In fact, I think
yeah,
everybody was extremely supportive in the show, which I want to get into some of like the supporting cast. But like,
yeah,
I just feel like since I don't think there's ever been an outplayer in the NHL yet, right? And on
no,
this show, they make it seem like there's absolutely no possibility. I mean, they're talking about like starting a nonprofit so that they can be closer together, but there's no talk about coming out really from anyone. Obviously, the
yeah.
Scott Hunter of it all, but it's like, so it seems like homophobia at least is running rampant there if no one's come out in real life, and on the show they kind of make it seem like coming out is not even an option.
Well, I mean, there's no one who's come out as an active NHL player. I believe there's no one who's even come out as a retired NHL player. I believe
Okay.
there's no one who's even said post retirement, which is different than tennis. Tennis has had men post career come out from ATP level men. Brian Vahaley, maybe most famously, of those who've officially, really clearly, unmistakably come out. And there's different ways of deciding who has or hasn't come out yet, based on various visibility things, whatever you want to say. People can discuss it amongst themselves as they listen or think about that. But no, in hockey, certainly, if that's what you're defining as homophobia, people saying closeted, then for sure that is absolutely the case in hockey. There's not out people. The most sort of famous gay figure in hockey, and I had to think about this for a while. There's not really many, but there was a general manager of the uh, Toronto Maple Leafs named Brian Burke, and his son
Mm.
Brendan Burke, I believe is his name. I hope I'm getting that right, came out as gay and then died shortly after or something. I think for some medical reason. I'm not 100%. Apologies to the Burks for possibly butchering this biography, but that was like the moment of a gay figure in hockey, who is this person who was a son
A
of
son
a
of
general
somebody?
manager.
That's a
That
stretch.
that was like that, right? It was largely a stretch, and he was someone who was within hockey, maybe had some sort of scouting role with the team or something. He was somewhere in the hockey family, as they'd say. And so they wound up doing a bunch of anti-homophobia, or more even like pro-inclusivity, let's say, campaigns around that, called "You Can Play" was the
Oh,
name of
yeah.
the campaign. Maybe that rings a
I
bell.
do
And
remember
it was
this.
like,
Yeah.
if you can play, you can play. And it was like kind of rainbow branded, and sort of be like, hey, if you're good enough to play hockey, we don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever. And that was a marketing push that Brian Burke, in his role as a leading executive type in the NFL, NHL was a face of, and there were several players who signed on to do the PSAs for that campaign, and were there doing it. So that was positive forward, And then there were a bunch of teams in the late 2010s or so who did Pride nights, who did um, either rainbow sort of style jerseys, rainbow flag jerseys, and also rainbow stick tape. And then there wound up being a pushback against this at
Right.
the point, post pandemic or maybe post Trump. I don't know exactly. People can check the exact dates, but there was a pushback on it. And actually, on my favorite team, the Flyers, there was a Russian defenseman named Ivan Provorov or Ivan Provorov who refused to like do warm ups or something because they were like wearing pride jerseys, and he like made this stand saying, "I'm not doing that because of my religion, and I'm like Russian Orthodox, and it offends me to have to be, having a rainbow patch on my sleeve during warm ups of this game." Like that was the level of his stance. And in response to that, the NHL like kind of took his side, said like, okay, we're not going to do this. We're not going to have Pride Nights anymore. We're not going to have rainbow stick tape. And there were a few guys, some sort of maverick allies in there who still did the tape occasionally in some teams. There's an article I shared with you earlier by Frankie De La Cretas, we can maybe link or something, that has a rundown of sort of history of homophobia in the NHL and why they think that the sort of league's current embrace, as it were, of hated rivalry brings a little hollow to them. But yeah, it's a moving thing, and yeah, and none of the big four sports have been super, uh, forward with gayness or having gay players or gay athletes, leading there and having long term starring careers. Certainly, no one of the level, because I mean, in the show, Hollander and Rosenhoff are like seem like they're sort of the two best players in the league at certain points, right? Like they're like
Right.
number one and number two draft picks in their year. They're kind of vying for the scoring titles. They're winning Stanley Cup or whatever non-Stanley Cup, non-trademark name they use in the show for it, the Cup. And yeah, they have they're clearly good. So certainly no one anywhere near that level. But that's true of every sport. I mean, like the players who have come out in major sports, in men's sports, are almost always more obscure players.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Collins in the NBA, Carl Nassib in NFL, and Michael Sam. There's been like maybe a baseball guy or two. I think one MLS player, Robbie Rogers, I want to say was his name. Like it's not the stars, right?
It's
It's
not
not
common.
players who are of this. So this show is very clearly fantasy and almost
Yes.
like fanfic in this level. Like, hey, imagine if these star players were gay and then with each other. Like, it's leaps. It's not anything that we have any reason to believe has ever happened in real life in the NHL. But the show is imagining what it would be like if it could. And so it's a really cool cross pollination, as I was saying, like of this sort of gay romance and like sort of heartfelt and affectionate, whatever. Um, it's sweet in the end, plus all the hot, sex and nudity stuff. In this space, it really has not had that, and I think that's a big part of why it's blown up. Right? Is that
Yeah.
it's sort of this thing we haven't seen before. It's almost like I don't know. It's almost like when TV shows or movies would have like a female president. Like in the '90s that started happening. Like that was like
Yes.
whoa. You just see it on screen. It's kind of crazy that we never had that, but on screen it's real. It's kind of like that. I mean, whatever analogy you want to use, it's fiction at this point, basically. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're totally fine. I mean, I think the big takeaway there is that yeah, there is still obviously homophobia. I guess for me, just was surprising at like how much they felt in the closet. And one thing that I really appreciated was kind of the joy that they felt when they did come out. Like I talked about this a
Mm-hmm.
little bit on a past episode, but like the gay friend group and the queer friend group that they had, and like
Mm-hmm.
the supportive women in the show. It's like every gay person needs a woman in their lives, like a Rose or a Svetlana or a Maria. I mean, I think my favorite scene of the entire show was in episode 3 when like Scott Hunter has gone on his run where, he runs like the least athletic human being I've ever seen. But he goes on his run, he comes in and he flirts with Kip. And then Kip turns around and looks at Maria and she's like, girl. And then the other straight guy comes in and is like, was that Scott Hunter? Da, da, da. And then she turns around and she's like, girl. Like it just is so perfect to me. I'm like, oh my God, this is so how this interaction would go for so many gay friend
Yeah.
groups. And I just feel like it hit on that so well. Like the friend groups, the joy that Kip had with being out with his friends at the bar, like it just was so nice to see a group of friends who are out and proud and happy, and like it kind of contrasts that with these hockey players who are all in the closet, and it's like, yeah, well, look how great your
Yeah.
life can be once you're out.
And I think that for me, the Kip and Scott Hunter arc for me felt much more realistic or much more plausible, or like could have already happened. That one actually could have already happened, right? Closeted NHL player meets someone from outside the hockey bubble in this barista or smoothie maker, whatever his job title is, who is clearly out and like is established out and has a whole group of friends, and the hockey player can kind of leap into that. The sort of the high wire act that Rosenoff and Hollander are doing is both being closeted, but making that connection to each other while still both closeted in this, under a microscope, spotlight, whatever you want to call it, space as two hockey stars, and meeting each other by sort of chance in this shower room of the photo shoot they were at. I don't know why they were both showering after a photo shoot, but it's fine. They drives the plot. They are, that to me is more like that would be way riskier and way sort of a bigger swing to go out and try to cruise or pick up some guy in the showers of a hockey locker room. Like that's to
So
me is much more
people
sort of
weren't
like, wow, like
cruising.
that's, yeah.
Were people not cruising in your the locker room at your when you played
My high
hockey,
school, not that I
or
ever
the
encountered.
NHL
No,
locker rooms you were in?
I can't say that I've ever seen that. No, and I've
Okay.
never heard any stories of that happening. I'm not saying it's never happened, but it's a different situation, right? And that's what I was saying. Like in terms of finding two closeted people, and just the degree of difficulty, for lack of a better term, is harder to make a connection when
Yeah.
you both have to sort of overcome this. And Ilya and his character seems much more comfortable in his sexuality, or much more forward. He's kind of making the move. Um, he sees some biological response from Hollander when I rewatched that made it clear that was sort of his green light to start going, that he could see in the shower without being too obvious about what he's talking about there. And yeah, and so that's kind of what kicks it off. But for a space like a tennis tour or whatever else it may be, like that's hard, to be in the closet and find someone else in the closet. Those hookups do happen in society, but it's just tougher, especially in a culture that is not always the most welcoming or supportive of it, or be seen as a risk, or yeah. And also, um, we can get this in the end. One of my thoughts on episode 6, but like that they're on different teams also makes it tougher. It'd be much more obvious or more easy to build a relationship with someone if you're on the same team, right? If you're together day in, day out, having the same travel schedule, like Hollander and Rosenoff maintain this by playing each other. Teams in the same division probably play each other, what, like 6 times a year, 6 times a year, plus whatever playoff series. Like there are very limited times when they're in the same city at any point in the year. That's why the sort of going to the cottage in the finale is such a big
Mm.
deal, because they're like, we're going to actually choose to be in the same place in the same time for an extended period of time, which we've never done before.
Uh yes, that the end of episode 5 when he says I'm coming to the cottage. That is like one of the times that I screamed. I literally have a list at the bottom of this outline of just times that I screamed or squealed or let out some noise.
I would I would love to hear more of that list.
Okay, well, we'll get there. But first of all, I think as you were talking, because we've talked a little bit about like, could this happen in tennis? Would this happen in tennis? And the only
Mm-hmm.
opportunity really that it would have where you have two people, I imagine, in the locker room, just them two, would be at a final, right? Like our locker
Mm-hmm.
rooms, they wouldn't in tennis be that easy to just have a situation that happened on this show, right? Unless it was right before like a slam final or a final of a tournament, right? Or after.
Yeah, you could have, yeah, but locker rooms definitely thin out as they go on. But you could also have locker rooms near the business end of a tournament from like quarterfinals on can be pretty empty. If there's only one match going on at a time on the stadium, if it's only the stadium hosting matches in some late round of the tournament, um, I guess there's doubles going on too, which triples potentially the population of a locker room at any given time because they're in the same space. But yeah, there would be times when you'd be alone in the locker room with another player. If you were like the only day session match or something, that could be
Mm-hmm.
there. But in that case, you are getting ready for a head-to-head match against each other, largely, right? And that's what interesting to me about this show, and why the word rivalry in the title. The show was very different in a lot of ways. We can get to this. I know it's on your outline, and getting to tennis also, than Challengers. I mean, Challengers is really a story about two real clear rivals, right? Who are very clearly
Mm-hmm.
rivalry. We get a lot of backstory on them. They have bad blood. They have ups and downs in the relationship. They have like tension and heat, and they have this very clear head-to-head confrontation on court in the match, in the climactic match of this movie. It takes a long time, and is the sort of climax of the story, and everything goes there, right? Hollander and Rosenoff are, for the most part, seem like they're much more on parallel tracks than really colliding tracks in this show. I felt like there's not really too many scenes. There's a kind of scene that the hockey person just seemed goofy to me in the first episode. It's like, oh my gosh, you can take a face off against each other, and I was like, oh bless. It's like these actors cannot skate. That's like the most they can kind of do is stand there for a face off. Like
How
that's
dare
like
you?
not really. You would never have something. It's like a jump ball in basketball. People who know basketball, right? It's like just not that climactic a thing. It's like gets the play going, but it's not really like a big moment to have two stars have a face off against each other. Like it would be so momentary, and the sport would move on, like scoring and winning games. And so there were a few different devices in the show they didn't use that I was surprised. Like, there were never like big, violent checks from one into the other. There was never a drop the glove sort of style hockey fight between the two, which would have been an easy plot device. Or I was thinking even like you could have something like they have these in hockey, like a bench clearing brawl, like a big fight where like the whole teams, all the players in the ice start fighting each other and they sort of pair off and pick someone to fight against. And it could be a situation where other guys
That's
started
so
fighting
dramatic, by the
and
way.
then Hollander and Rosenoff were left there naturally sort of paired off and like, are we going to also fight? Everyone else is fighting. Is it weird if we don't fight? What do we do here? Like I thought they might, maybe they did that second book. I don't know, like you said, the books are a mystery to us largely, but fighting seemed like, and obviously it would be a much more tense, feel bad, fraught moment. And mostly these two guys' relationship on the show was pretty smooth. Like they liked each other. They always kind of liked each other. They were
Yeah.
maybe distant or maybe a little bit cold at sometimes, but like it was a fairly smooth, if slow, trajectory they had towards their ultimate relationship status in the end of the episode, riding off into the sunset together at the end of the finale.
Well, I do want to remind you that there was at least one scene interchanging of Ilya pinning Shane against the glass and then also pinning him down on the bed
Right.
and that going back and forth.
Yeah.
That to me was absolute perfection cinematography. All the awards, give them Oscars.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. There clearly, from a hockey perspective, was more opportunity. You were talking a little bit about challengers. I don't think tennis could even handle. I'm trying to imagine this happening in tennis, like this show being about two tennis players, which, by the way, just shout out. There is a book that I had the author on, Katie Chandler,
Mm-hmm.
came on here and she talked about it. And it is
Yeah.
a very similar vibe of two lesbians on the WTA tour in her book. And her book is called
Mm-hmm.
Backhanded Compliments. So go check that out for sure. But, anyways, I'm trying to imagine what tennis would do with this show, and I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine what they would do in real life, or if this show, like if this situation happened in real life, or if this show even happened. Like tennis could barely handle
I think
challengers, and challengers was essentially like PG-13. Like challengers, in my opinion, should have been amped up like three times. I said that we had an hour and a half long episode reviewing challengers, and I felt like there were so many opportunities to like amp that thing up to make it like Heated Rivalry. It was so tame, and
yeah.
like I just don't think tennis could handle the show.
I think it would have to. I mean, I don't know that hockey was ready to handle this show necessarily
Okay,
either. Even if
fair.
I know like hockey romance novels or erotica, whatever you want to call this, is kind of a well built out genre. Hockey players being, big muscly white boys are like very popular tropes for these
Hot.
romance writers, clearly, and then the readership likes it. So hockey is a crowded category, from what I understand, in this in a way that tennis probably isn't. But I do think yes, this show certainly makes me realize how not far challengers went, right? Because challengers was a lot was they kissed the spoilers for challengers, the boys kiss once. It's sort of a almost accidentally in the middle of the start of a threesome with a girl, and then they have like innuendo the rest of the time, right? But there's no like sex beyond that. Whereas in Heated Rivalry, within 15 minutes they're blowing each other. Like, I mean, it's
Yes.
so it's that's what it is. It gets so quickly to the penetration and to the action that like it's like, wow, this is actually like giving the people what they want on that level. Like it's not holding back. It's not a tease. It's actually going for it and having these consummated relationships happening
Not
on screen and in the
consummated.
stories. And so it's just, yeah, it goes much further, and it is about that. And it's not dancing around that. It's not like a tease. It's not like, there's undertones. No, there's no undertones. There's just action in the bedroom. So action in this show takes place in the bedrooms much more than the ice rink. Whereas in Challengers, it was more like on court scenes, choreographing sort of like aping or mimicking bedroom things in some ways, but it was happening on court. Here, almost all the action takes place in hotel rooms and bedrooms and such in this show.
And
it's
that
very little on ice. Yeah.
And that feels very tennis, by the way. I had an alternative ending. I'll link to our review of Challengers, but I had an ulterior ending that really, I think, would have at least gotten us there at the very
Oh, what was
end,
that?
which was, I think, you know how they had a sauna scene, which, you know, honestly, like the idea of going into a sauna after a tennis match is a little bit weird. But the sauna scene,
Yeah.
I think they should have had at the end of that show, Art like getting off to Patrick telling him about him cheating and what happened with Tashi. Like I think that could have been like a hot way of like bringing them both together at the end, is like both of them getting off together talking about what they did with
Oh,
Tashi.
so he's like enjoying being a cuck
Sub cuck. Yeah,
in this
exactly.
scenario.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm so glad
Sure.
to have you on the show and hear you say the word cuck, by the way. Okay, well,
This
tennis.
only this is the first time I think I've said that word on the podcast. So congratulations to the
Yes,
show for
thank
doing
God. Okay. I want to mention a little bit about tennis. They do talk about, first of all, they briefly
Mm-hmm.
mention Serena. I think you said in the first episode, right? And then in the fourth
Mm-hmm.
episode, they have a full blown conversation about tennis, which I found to be hilarious because, of course, it's Shane's mom is saying, you know, have you decided about Wimbledon? Rolex really wants you there. They're afraid that the box is too Tennessee. And Shane responds with, does that mean too white? And of course, like Shane's dad is the one who wants him to go. And he's like, hey, dad, you're the tennis fan. Why don't you go? And I'm just like, wow, this show is dragging tennis so badly. Like, of course, they're associating tennis with like old straight white men. No one else would possibly want to go to Wimbledon except his dad, the old straight white man. I'm like, tennis just can't catch a break in general. But I also noticed that there was a bit of a connection to me with recent tennis news when Ilya said that he didn't want to have a Russian passport anymore. Did you catch that? That felt very
Yeah.
tennis coded
Yeah,
to
he did
me.
say that. I will say one thing, and we can get into this now just because
Do it.
as a sort of critique, whatever, and I'm sure it's in the books, but like I didn't understand a lot of the logic. Maybe it's more fleshed out in the books, but like why Ilya decides, and this is spoilery, whatever, this is plot from episode 6, and I'm sure we've already given spoiler warnings, but like Ilya decides that his plan is to go to Ottawa to get traded
Right.
or to be a free agent and sign, leave Boston and go to Ottawa, which is closer to Montreal. It's like DC and Philadelphia. They're fairly close. But I don't understand why he didn't just go to Montreal. Like, if you want to be on the team, just be on Shane's team. Like, maybe that's not rivalry anymore, but like, you can get, if you want to be with a specific player, and this happens with brothers fairly frequently actually in the league. Like, someone was like, I want to play with my brother. My brother's also in the NHL. Let's team up, and that'd be great. And so there are brothers who like request trades or arrange trades or both go to the same place so they can team up. Like, that's the most common scenario. That's not unheard of in hockey. And maybe there'd be salary cap reasons, but they almost never entertain the idea of Ilya going to Montreal. And I didn't really understand that. I was like, why not just go to Montreal? So he has this sort of dance. And I also don't know that like, I don't know if it'd be easier to get a Canadian passport than an American one, because he lives in Boston for 8 years as a player there. You could get a US green card and get a process going to the US. But yeah, so I didn't really understand that sort of dance that he was doing in that conversation. That's also the part of the episode where Shay makes it clear he doesn't want Ilya to go through with a sham marriage to Svetlana. He kind of puts his foot down about that as they're playing
Yes, he
footsie
got
on the couch,
jealous.
and which I appreciated, that sort of not going through that ruse. So yeah, but that was one thing in the plot. So maybe if there's people listening who know the books or whatever, well, like I just don't understand, and maybe it's like I think it happens at the end of the second book or something. It's some big plot where they get to play together finally or something. But like, it just seemed to me like, why this middleman? Why not just go play on the same team? You could be together all the time. Then you could share hotel rooms. People would think it was actually relatively normal to share a hotel room with a teammate. Like, you could really
Why?
go all the way if you were on the same team.
Okay, why were they sharing hotel rooms to begin with, especially if they're also rich? Why were they sharing hotel rooms? I'll never understand. I was thinking,
Well, the teams pay for the hotels, and so it's a way, it's a cost saving money. I don't know if they do it at NHL level all the time. I feel like rookies have to share hotels. They definitely do. Definitely NHL players on the road will not all get their own hotel room. You're also only there for one night. You're like barely in the room. You're just sleeping.
Oh
So
my
they'll
God,
still
that's
put
so
players
hot
together,
to
and
think of two.
uh,
That is so hot to think of two NHL players sharing a room. Like maybe I got into the wrong sport. Um, but I will just say, like, I mean,
tennis
yeah,
players do that too. There will be players at lower tournaments who will share rooms. Also, it does happen.
yes, okay, fair. Yeah, I was thinking that he didn't want to go because that almost would be too close. Like they wouldn't be able to hide their relationship if they were on the same exact team and constantly together. Like that just seemed very risky to
No.
me. You're talking a little bit about your prediction for season 2 there, with maybe that's something that they explore. So I'm just going to use this as an
I don't know.
opportunity to tell you what I think is going to happen in season 2, because there's going to have to be some
Okay.
conflict. And I feel like I've seen this, like this was a queer as folk storyline that I want to see happen here, or that I think is going to happen. They're going to get in some sort of argument, some sort of drama is going to ensue. It's going to be Ilya's fault, and
Mm.
it's going to be like a big dramatic fight, and when they come back to kind of like come back together and make up for it, Shane is going to top Ilya, and he's going to finally be the top at least once in season 2. And that makes me happy for Shane, because he has been getting it on and off the ice all year, and he's been going through it.
But that's what he wants. And he said that to Rose. He said, the actual issue is that I'm more of a
Mm,
hole than a peg, was his
that,
line or whatever,
that is
right?
such a good
Which she
line.
loved. That was a great scene, by the way. Like there were the couple, like the I think you want to talk about this as well, but like the coming out scenes in this show, which there
Mm,
really are two meaningfully, which are Shane with Rose, who's his girlfriend. It's not going great for them in the bedroom, it seems like, but they are dating for a bit. And then Shane with his parents. Later, like I thought those were really well handled and like really like nice and sweet and like affirming and stuff. And it's also interesting too, the way that they draw up the show is that, and I was shocked by this, that both Scott, there are three gay hockey players in the show, right? That we're aware of: Scott and Ilya and Shane. And Scott and Ilya, both their parents are dead. They're both like orphans, essentially. They don't have parents to come out to. They kill Ilya's father dies midway through the show,
right.
and Scott was orphaned as a kid. And so Shane's parents are the only parents in play, and the only sort of family who this can't happen with. So it's sort of, and also Kip has a father who's in the show as well, who's not a
And
hockey
so
player,
supportive and
and they
sweet.
all have these like, yes, and all the parents get like great like A+ gold stars more or less for how they handle these moments, and it's very sweet and like affirming, and shows like that it's not, Shane, when Shane's dad catches Ilya and Shane making out or whatever in the cabin out of nowhere, and that was like shot like a horror movie, the sort of silhouette of him
So
seeing them
good.
and the whatever. That was a fun moment, or a fun moment of sort of like heart and throat for that. um he's like, "Oh my gosh, it's my nightmare," and Ilya says in this very poetic line, like, "Well, maybe it's time to wake up from this nightmare and just live
Oh,
it." And it's how it winds up being, and for a lot of people that can be the case with coming out. Like you build it up so much, and then it's not as bad as you feared it might be from people who are close to you. And obviously people's families and parents and social circles and support networks, whatever, vary, and not everyone is great about these things in the world, certainly. But there are a lot of people who are great and who will make it a non-issue in your lives. And Shane also says earlier in that finale, he says, like, I think they'd be fine with it. Like he's not worried about them per se. It's just
mm-hmm.
sort of like the taking that leap into the unknown, or ripping off that band-aid, whatever you want to use as an
Yeah.
analogy. Like it's still like just a moment that causes him pause, and then once it happens, it's great. And then I love, we can get to this too, and this also relates to tennis, how quickly Shane's mom turned into like momager and was like, we
Chris
can make so
Jenner.
much money off of this. The
Yes.
brands will love this.
Well, listen, I talked about it a little bit when a couple of players, Joao Lucas Reyes and
Mm-hmm.
Micah Brunold, they both
Yeah.
like have gotten really positive responses in a lot of ways online, gained a lot of followers. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually one of my jokes. You're talking about Instagram followers. Micah has gone from 2,000 when I first kind of found his story, and now has like 20 something thousand already, has beaten me too. So I'm just getting my ass kicked all over the place on Instagram. But Ben, I want to just let me do my story time here real quick, because you're hitting on two
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that really stuck out to me and like made me super emotional and like feel very happy about this show. And that is, one, the situation with Rose. Like I think everyone, it's going to take a long time, but if you think back like maybe 15, 20 years, I was in the closet and I actually was hooking up with girls. I know it's shocking, but it is true.
Aww. It's
And one of
adorable.
them one of them was like when he was talking about like how horrible the hookups were. I immediately resonated and started thinking about all of these times that I was hooking up with a girl and had to come up with a reason to stop it. So like one time I accidentally like purposely rolled myself off the bed into like her bedside table and like crashed the table on purpose because I needed to end it because things were going too far and I was like, oh my god, I was freaking out. And then another time I was like, oh my God, let's go to the pool. Like I would always have some sort of way to make it end before things got too crazy. And so hearing like, and she, anyway, that girl ended up being super supportive when I came out. And so it just was like so
Yeah.
nice to see like these side characters, like the women and the friends. Like I had a lot of close girlfriends as well that were like super supportive and helpful when I was coming out. And then the other moment that really stuck out to me with like these strong women characters was when he came out to his mom, and that was when like I actually cried, and I literally never cry. But I cried during that episode because that was the exact conversation I had with my mom when I came out. Like I had built it up. I
Mm.
was so scared, and she was like, Tony, I can tell something's wrong. Like, what's wrong? And so we sat there, and my older sister was more like that other side of the mom that was like, okay, here's the planner. What are we doing? How are we doing this? So my older sister was there,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom's first question was like, oh my gosh, like why did you feel like you had to lie to me? Like she was like all about very similar to how his mom was. So I think when we're talking about things that like really resonate with people and why they've attached to this show, it's because like they have these moments that feel so real that you can relate to. And I'm like, almost every person has hooked up with someone who's like, you know, in the closet or maybe was closeted or whatever. Almost everyone has
Mm-hmm.
who's gay has like come out to their parents and had some sort of like very emotional moment, you know. Um my dad also, by the way, my dad was there and he also told me that he had never met a gay person, that he had just seen them on HGTV. That was his first comment. So he was like, sorry, I've never seen a gay person in real life. I've only seen them on HGTV. I was like, okay, we'll
That's
deal with that
amazing.
later. Um so anyway, my point is like I think this show really highlighted like women and their support of gay men and how important they are, and just like it's just
Mm-hmm.
weird how I'm watching this show and like immediately I'm like, oh my god, I remembered all of these weird stories from all these years ago about like hurling myself into an end table because it was like things were going too far and I was freaking out.
Yeah. Yeah, there are parts of this story, of the coming out story, and I think even people who are not gay, I've heard, can relate to parts of it. Just having a secret, having something in your life that you're like nervous about or afraid of, or something that you're not open about in your life, and the weight that that has, and sort of the coming forward with it, and finding yourself or finding what you want to do. And obviously, it's most resonant with LGBT folks and other people who are not, or wherever they are on the gender spectrum. Like this is, yeah, it's fairly broad, and there are universalities of it, and there are parts of it who will relate to Shane. And Shane is sort of the protagonist, I feel like, of he's they're both, I think they're obviously both leads. You know, if they're getting
Mm-hmm.
nominated for Emmys, they should both be leads in this show. But Shane, I feel like, is the one who we sort of see more like his interior life a bit, and he's like more open, and he's more vulnerable, or sort of more clearly going through the steps and like figuring things out as he goes, and reluctant, whereas like Rosenoff comes in kind of big swinging, and already
Mm.
ready, and throwing Shane down on the bed and ready to have his
Oh.
way with him or whatever. Like he's much more he's much more in command, and seems more sure of himself. And obviously there are moments of doubt, and we get to his whole messy family situation, his whole Russian monologue that happens in the fifth episode, which is
Oh,
amazing acting by
so
Connor Story to be
good.
able to do that at foreign language. And now people who are Russian speakers give that pretty high marks for how he executed that, as someone who spoke really minimal, if any, Russian before signing on to do this show. So that, again, that's one of the things where like the performances really like outstrip the small budgetness of this show, and how small the show should be on paper. They really kind of elevate the material beyond that. Yeah, so that's definitely something. And yeah, and I think that there's still more for those characters to do. Like the season ends with them fully out to each other and out to Shane's parents, and maybe others are coming. I don't know. I assume like Rose will find out about Ilya soon enough if she didn't know already. Like like other people who are in the inner circle, we'll find out eventually. But like it's still already big steps to get that first part. But then it feels like they're on fairly solid ground, because it feels like they're on the same page with each other. They agree to, Ilya uses the word boyfriend, and
Ah,
Shane's
so
like
cute.
heart skips a beat, and then it's
So
it's
does
it's a very
Tony's.
sweet moment. And yeah, of course. I mean, so does everybody's. I feel like in that moment, it's a very sweet. It's like he says, "I love you" moment from like 10 minutes earlier in the show too. Like it's a whole bunch of little milestones that happen for these two on their journey after they've been hooking up for 8 years. I mean, like
I
it
know.
was a journey for them to get there, but they got there, and so it's a happy ending. And that's also one of the things I think people love about the show. So often, like queer stories are tinged as like tragic in some way and involve someone dying or someone, some bad ending or some,
Mm-hmm.
hate crime or whatever it may be, like happening to these characters. And this feels like it's a really feel good show. Like it's like ultimately these guys have stress certainly in moments of it, but everything works out for them in the end of the season. And I believe from what I generally hear about the series overall, like, there's no like tragedy looming for either of them in the second book. Like
Yeah,
things maintain as being fairly positive and lovely and nice and warm. And that's also what makes it just kind of a nice comfort watch of a show. Like it is like it's something we don't see so much that it's like kind of a positive representation without it being, anything too heavy. It's just sort of like light, but also um serious about getting these things right. It's like it's a real show. It's a serious show. It's a credible show. It's yeah,
of
it's
course.
something that I
Well, and
think
I
has been
know
a really remarkable thing.
there has to be some sort of like they're going to have to get some sort of backlash from players, I imagine, in the future. That has to happen. But yeah, you're right. There are so many like it's so positive because I think of like It's a Sin is a show that I love and I loved so much, and it was
Mm.
but it was
I haven't seen
about
that yet.
but yeah, it was like I was hysterically crying during most of those episodes because it was about, the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
But there's also we were talking about Connor Story's acting, and there was a moment where that right in the scene that you're talking about, where I think you can really see that one of my other predictions, I think he's going to become like a very good comedic actor. I think he's going to have like a really good comedy moment because there's the part that I think he hit his like comedy beat so well is when Shane is like, "Hey, and this is Ilya Rozanov, and you know that." He's like, and he's here, and Ilya takes his hand, hits him on the shoulder, and says, "Lovers." And I was just like, it made me,
Lovers or
yeah,
whatever his Russian accent is.
it made me burst out laughing. I'm like, and then Shane's like, no, no, like that's gross. Like it was. I have rewatched that little clip so many times, and then
Yeah.
there's the scene of him like eating the spaghetti while they're having this like very deep conversation. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's just very good at finding his like where the comedy is, and it's just so fun.
Yeah. No, he's great. I've like I said, my algorithm has been taken over by the show, so I've seen many Connor Story and mostly him, and also some of Hudson Williams, interviews and press tour type stuff. And yeah, they're very impressive, both of them, and they both clearly and Jacob and the whole scene put a lot of thought into these characters and to
Mm-hmm.
reading the books. And it's interesting also, it does seem like the original ambitions of this show were relatively small. Like, hey, let's just make a show that fans of these books will like, right? It's almost like fan service for the book reading group. It wasn't meant to be, the number one show on HBO Max that it's turned into, and
So
being
crazy.
this real cultural phenomenon. But it has the goods. Like they built this thing that was, I think, not that was really good, and they put a lot of thought and effort and integrity into making it as good as they possibly could to do justice to these books and to these stories and to the fans who love these stories and these characters. But they achieved something that had a much broader resonance, which is really, really pretty remarkable. It's almost, yeah, it's like it's a real sleeper hit in that way. It's almost like I'm sure there's better examples of this, but like My Big Fat Greek Wedding or like Blair Witch Project or something that's like meant to be like a small movie that just like resonates hugely and blows up. Like I'm sure that's happened in TV too, but yeah, but it's definitely been a big honking hit. So, and I hope that paves the way for more things like it. Like I hope that more shows like this can get greenlit. Maybe, who knows, maybe there'll be more of these, because there are shelves and shelves full of these sports erotica books. I wonder if any others are getting optioned at this point to to be made into the next one. Who knows?
For sure. Okay, we're hitting an hour. I told you we'd stay around an hour, so let's wrap up here
Whatever you want to do
soon.
is fine.
But I just want to say also, like, I'm looking through my notes of like things I wanted to talk about. The attraction and the chemistry between these two characters. I think that's another thing
Mm-hmm.
is like you can feel like they need each other. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yep.
so nice to see. There's a lot of like gay shows and gay hookups and things like that. But to me, the chemistry is so strong between these two that you can like feel like they actually need each other. And like that is also fun and hot to see on a gay show that you don't see a lot of, like where it's like these two are lusting after each other, not just in the sense where I have said before where like they started the show by lusting and they ended the show by loving each other, but like they are like in heat around each other, and it's so fun to watch.
Yeah, and when they're not together, you're sort of waiting for them to get back together on this show. Like
Right.
they really do have this magnetic pull, and that's where the action happens. I have two more thoughts, or three more thoughts actually, if I can just remember my notes here. If we're wrapping things up,
No, you're
um,
good. We're good on
my
time.
one, okay, okay. My one sort of critique of the last episode, which and most things are positive, the one part where I thought that that the low budgetness whatever kind of hurt the credit wasn't believable was the beginning of episode 6 when Scott is giving his speech at the award show
Mm.
and Kip isn't there,
Oh,
and Kip
yes.
is like, and Kip is at the bar, and it just seemed like, and also the backdrop of the speech on the stage is supposed to be like the Vegas award show. I don't know if you've ever seen a clip from the NHL awards. But it's like
Definitely
big,
not.
slick glass, lights, and like high production Vegas show. Like an award, it's an award show. It's like it looks like any other big budget award show, and it's like Scott standing in front of this like really janky like wood panel backdrop, and like it's
Yeah.
Scott talking to a podium to no one. There's no audience visible, and Kip didn't make the trip. If if this really happened, him kissing on ice and being a phenomenon of the story in the final game of this cup finals, generic, not Stanley Cup in this league, then Kip would have been a celebrity himself and certainly would have been a +1 to the awards. They would have shown Kip in the audience there. And so that just seemed like, did they just not have the budget to like make an audience for Kip to sit in and do like a whole like sort of set piece of that? So that was one where I was like, that rings false to me that Kip is not there and is watching this from a bar across the country. He could have brought his whole friend group out to Vegas. It would have been a more realistic thing for that way to go, actually, in real life, for that sort of moment.
I had that on my list as well, by the way.
Yeah.
I had
Okay, good.
that he should have been in the audience when he accepted the award. I also have, and I'm just going to throw this out there before you say your next one. I'm so sorry, but Shane, as someone who has no upper lip, and I have to get lip injections to have somewhat of an upper lip, I would personally like for Hudson Williams to get lip injections before next season. Okay, thank you so much.
Hudson, you're beautiful the way you are, and I'm sure Tony, you are as well. Come on.
Okay, your next one.
I've not. I don't know if I've seen you with. I don't know if I've seen you without injections, but I'm sure it's lovely. I loved. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but the mom switching to momager mode so quickly after hearing this revelation from her son, and quickly being like, okay, we can make money out of this. It's very realistic, and also like I've used this line. Some people have gotten offended by this, whatever. But I really have a feeling in sports, in men's sports particularly, in tennis, absolutely. If there's a top tennis player, there is a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow. If you come out and you are the first person coming out in your sport, whatever, you will get, and certainly this was the case 10 years ago. I assume it's culture shifted a bit. Maybe certain things are less quote unquote woke, or there's more pushback on certain things. But there is still this big appetite for that. There was a top ATP player coming out. Like, look, like we only know the names Joao Reis, Lucas da Silva, and Mika Brunold because they came out. That's the only reason we're aware of these players who are way outside the top 100, both of them still. That's been their sort of calling card and their resonance to an audience. And if it was a top level player in men's tennis, it'd be a huge deal. I mean, think of like Gus Kenworthy, who's a skier, some sort of freestyle skier or snowboard. I think he's a skier.
Yes.
Like he's only become a sort of, I'm being kind here. I'm trying to be C-list, whatever celebrity of some staying power because he's gay, right? That's the only reason we know
And
this
hot.
person from this obscure winter sport. Yes, and that's a multiplier for it too. But if he was just hot, it wouldn't have gotten there. He had to be gay and hot to have that sort of staying power in the categories he's been in. And so that's there for tennis, right? And so I'm sure there are gay players in other parts of the ATP rankings. Obviously not out, but like I just know that. And there also have been times, like I'm not going to name names, but like I've interviewed players or talked to players, and definitely had various things pinged for me or walked away being like, wow, that person sure seemed like many gay people I've met in his apparent gayness who've been a player at a tournament. And
drop the names now.
Those are
now, Ben.
No, there are a couple. I will tell you when we wrap. But there's a couple if you want. But there's a couple names who, and I maybe won't even do that. But like, there's
joking.
a couple. It happens and exists, and there's still, and it just shows like even if it sort of seems obvious people around them, there's still barriers to them, and you have to think. And this happens with Rosenov. It's a little different because he's in a U.S. or North American league, but like he's Russian, right? And that's one of his biggest hurdles. Like I can't be out and go to Russia. That's the Daria Kasatkina story. She left It hasn't been out. It hasn't been back to Russia since she came out, which is a tragic story in a lot of ways that she's really had to uproot her life because of
Yes.
that. Um, but for when you're looking at tennis players, I mean, like, okay, what are the barriers between you and coming out? That is a big one of them. Nationality is one of them. Think about what their family and their parents are like is another one. Maybe some endorsement stuff too. I do hope that like the popularity of this show and of other play, seeing the booms that the Race to Silvas and Brunolds are getting in the world, can make it seem like the path is being smooth and like, okay, it's going to be okay if you're a top 50 ATP player, to come out, and like it'll be really
Mm-hmm.
positive, and you'll get fans at the stands at your matches. I'm sure. I believe there were like fans with rainbow flags at Joao's match in New York because it was his first Grand Slam
Yes,
match. Like
there were.
yeah. So that's great, and like that could be a thing. But there are
And that
still
was qualifying, by the way.
things, and yeah, qualifying exactly. There's like still little, and he'll be in Australia qualifying. So I've never met him, so I'm looking forward to hopefully getting a chance to talk to him, maybe in Australia,
Yeah.
this year. If he wins, probably has to win a round for me to be able to talk to him reasonably. Yeah, but hopefully, but there basically are, like, for every player you think of, or every athlete, what's stopping them? And for Scott Hunter, he talks about this when he's talking with Kip, like he has his foundation, or whatever else, being captain of the U.S. team, and like he's that's everything about this show. Like they pick like three people who are like really big stars in the league to be the three gay players. It's not like some rank and file
So
player
true.
on these teams. They're like the faces of these teams, which is again fiction, but um, yeah. All that to say, like for every there are still obstacles, whether they look big or small from a distance, from third person. It's different from how they might feel to a person individually, and how what they might see as their own obstacles coming out. And the other thing is too, hopefully generationally it gets easier. Like hopefully there will be a gay, NHL player, within our
I
lifetimes at
hope
least.
so.
I mean, like, because I think one of the things that there was a goalie, a Swedish goalie who mentioned this, who was, I think, on the Canucks or something, he's not gay, but he was doing interviews for about the issue. He got asked about it, and he said his fear or concern was basically that like all of the gay hockey player kids all kind of got bullied out of the sport when they were still kids, and didn't, and just the environment was so hostile to them, they didn't feel like they could stick with the sport, and so they left the sport before they had a chance to come out. And that, I'm sure, describes a lot of people, right? But hopefully those early stages, those developmental stages of the sport for boys and teenage boys and young men, can become less toxic, to where people can still feel like they can be themselves, or at least be comfortable in those stages, and then be able to stay on the train or on the path. And it's hard to make it to the top level of any pro sport. It's really hard to be one of
Of
those
course.
players. But someone can make it through and be the gay player. So I'm sure that's the case with tennis too. I'm sure that Mika Brunold, who's I think only 21, I'm sure he had like a much easier path than a player would have 20 years ago, in
Of
terms of the culture he was
course.
growing up with in Switzerland as a kid born whenever he was, gosh, 2003 or
I
four.
can't
He's
talk about
young.
it.
But yeah, but but yeah, but you know what I mean. Like, I hopefully these things are trending in the right directions, and the numbers catch up with this. It'll take time. It's slow. It took 8 years for Shane Hollander and Ilya Rozanov to call each other boyfriends and say "I love you" if they're from their first hookup. So it does take time, but hopefully things are progressing there. And I do think that, yeah, a hit like this show can, life can imitate art a little bit. There could be some player, some athlete in some sport who watches this and sees the popularity of it, and it's like, wow, maybe things aren't as scary or as bleak or as risky as I've talked myself into thinking that they were. And maybe um, the world is readier for me to be my authentic self than I thought they were. And that could be a lovely thing if that happens in tennis or anywhere else in the world. And even people, in their own personal lives, if seeing something like this, seeing characters on screen who aren't just on HGTV like your dad was seeing back
Stop.
in the day, like could can I do think representation matters. That's what I'm saying. So I
For
do think these
sure.
things are important, and yeah. So I think this show has been a positive force, and I think hopefully we'll be reaping the benefits of it as a culture for a ways to come.
Well, and for like to the point of that guy, saying that he thinks a lot of the gay players are kind of weeded out before they get to NHL.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think tennis can be so popular for a lot of gay kids, especially because
Yeah.
especially for men, like you're not on that kind of what can be toxic teammate environment. You really can kind
Mm-hmm.
of pave your own way. Okay, let me see what
And
else I
one
have.
thing I
Oh,
want to say
go.
about that also too, just briefly, I was saying that's just the difference between hockey and tennis. Hockey doesn't have women around the way that tennis does. Tennis has women, those helpful female characters. We talk about in the
Mm-hmm.
show, who are these touchstones for these various men. Hockey's a very male space. These teams and their crews be very, very male dominated. It's not like a combined sport. Women's hockey is a relatively new thing, really, as a sort of mainstream concept in hockey, and still fledgling. They don't play combined events really ever, except for the Olympics. I guess they're at the same place at the same time. But yeah, it's not that way. There's not people like Billie Jean King or Martina Navratilova or Amelie Mauresmo or whoever else as people who are forebears even on the opposite locker room to be coming out in this way. Like there's just not the texture for it, and there's not the sort of space for that self-expression. And also sort of this, I feel like tennis, is individualistic. You get to choose what you want to wear. You get to choose your own schedule. You get to have autonomy over certain kinds of self-control and self-expression, whereas in whereas in hockey you kind of are a cog in the machine as a player on a
Mm-hmm.
20 player roster. Like you kind of have to fit in and go with the flow, and not rock the boat too much to be able to stay in the league.
Yeah. Okay, a few other things I just want to touch on really quickly before we hop off.
Mm-hmm.
The dancing scene, there's like that dance off scene of them with the tattoo song that you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That gave me lots of shades of Britney and Justin, how they had their dance off after their breakup. Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake. For the young kids out there, if you don't know, look it up. That is a very important pop culture moment, and that gave me big shades of that. Let me see what I have on my list of times that I squealed. Okay, episode
Yes,
3,
please.
the girl scene, best scene of
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, in episode 4, when they first said each other's first names, that got a squeal out of me.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Hunter and Kip kissing on the episode 5 at the end. I'm coming to the
Of
cottage at
course.
episode 5. And then in episode 6 when it ended, this was also a like I wasn't ready for that episode to end. It's very rare that like I'm watching TV these days and like the credits start coming on. I'm like, what? Like I was not ready for that episode to end, and I was not ready for this show to end. Um, so I think that's like exciting as we look forward to season 2, because I'm like, whoa, I have not like yearned for more. Similar to how Shane yearns for Ilya, I have not yearned for like a show to stay on like this in years.
That's one thing I actually heard about the books, is that the book actually goes a little bit further. The show cuts off. I don't know if you want to know this, but the show cuts off. It's a little bit maybe a spoiler for season 2, but the show cuts off as they're driving away into the sunset, literally, and being sweet. And then the book, apparently, Heated Rivalry, the book has them starting their foundation. It's like a press conference of the two of them together launching
Stop.
there. So it does happen. That does
Okay,
happen. Which feels like okay,
stop.
it feels like okay, sure. It feels like, sorry
Oh
to,
my
if you
god.
want to cut that as a spoiler for season 2 maybe, but like
No, I'm
that
not
is, I've
cutting
heard
anything.
they do that, which it's nice. Again, I just think they should be on the same team. I don't know why they're dancing around, like,
It's
coming
too
closer to each other.
risky. Okay, and you didn't need to do your
It's
fingers like
just,
that.
yeah.
Um, okay. Let's see. Times that I cried when Ilya's speaking Russian and says "I love you." By the way, one other critique I have
Mm-hmm.
that I like was crying. Then I wish that in that moment, Shane, after they hung up, said something like to the camera into the phone, like, "Okay, Ilya hangs up," and I wish Shane had said or done something to prove that he actually had learned Russian to like for Ilya and that he knew everything he said. I think that would have been super fun if
His
he
Google Translate out on his
right,
computer to like
or
live
if he had
translate the
just
whole
said
thing.
something like if he had said like "I love you too" or something, like he had said something to make us realize that he had already learned
It was
Russian.
it was good that they didn't stick with that device too long, that like within the next episode they had the English language mutually comprehensively understood I love
Yes.
yous in English to each other. It wasn't just the one way secret Russian code that went over Shane's head in that moment. That was a sweet literary sort of device of having that Russian monologue. But yeah, I'm glad there wasn't too much of that, because that's just a lot of things to track. But yeah, it was good. One other little thing that I liked, this is
Please.
smaller, and one of the other things with this show that's really interesting, and I'm sure there's, I don't know if you thoughts on this, but how popular the show is with women, women who are really into this gay male romance stuff, and they also are a huge readership of this genre of books. But I feel like this probably would add to the appeal of this, was for women, because I don't want to get too deep into this, but the constant, when in the hookup scenes in episodes 1 and 2 specifically, I think there are all these little like Rosenoff like consent to check-ins as they're progressing along. Like, is this okay? Is this what you want? It's like, sort of like the constant talking and like the making sure like he's not going too far and not actually like, throwing him down on the bed and just ravaging him in his own ways, without, saying a word. This is very sort of, yeah, they're on like kind of level footing. Maybe that's part of the appeal of this, male romance in this sorts of genres. Like, it's not like one of them is kind of the more dominant one in certain ways, but at the same time, they also are like, Shane never feels like he's out of control. Like, he never feels like he's, being pushed around or getting fully dominated or whatever you want to say. You know what I mean? I hope
any
like
more than
it's
he
yeah,
any more than he wants to be, because he is just
and he
a
wants to
big
be.
slut.
Yes.
And by the way, that as every good top should, that's what Ilya was doing. That is what good tops should be doing, is confirming. And
Yes.
second of all, the other thing is like, that's what I meant earlier when I said like, I never bought into like Ilya being an asshole and like not being like having a lot of dimension because of those kind of conversations. Like, that to me was giving a lot of
Yeah.
signals of like, oh, this isn't just like an asshole guy. Like, he actually does have a lot of caring. That came out a lot, by the way, like when he was in water. Another scene that I think was very underrated was him with the kids in the pool. I thought that was like the cutest, sweetest moment when he was in with the kids. Um, Okay, I will end it with the last thing I just want to mention, which is the dirty talking in this show is like top tier. Like, I could not get enough. I have a whole other section in my outline called times Tony paused and rewound it. I won't get into every single one of them, but I'm just gonna say that the dirty talking, well done to Jacob Tierney, well done to anyone involved in that, because it is really impressive and not cringe. I think the other thing that I want to leave with is that so much like queer content is very cringy, whether it's gay friend groups
Yeah.
or gay couples. It's very easy to go into the cringe. Nothing about this show was cringy, and that makes me very happy. Ben, we've been talking for an hour and
Yeah.
26 minutes. I not only
I agree. I will say I agree. I agree. It's not cringy. No, that's the thing. Like, this show, like, I don't think people were expecting the show to be good. Honestly, like when people who were about like, it's, this sort of genre of original, a crave original, made for a small Canadian streaming company based on excuse me, based on some sort of, erotica books. Like, this is not supposed to be good, right? It could be steamy, it could be sultry, it could be satisfying in those ways potentially. But like, that it's just wound up being great. They took this sort of like genre that people look down on, and made it and elevated it and made it something that is like, in its own way, kind of prestige TV.
for
Is
sure.
really remarkable. So I think I just think like, I'm sure they are, because they're getting lots of success and lots of accolades and metrics, all sorts of different ways. But they should be really proud of what they did, and lots of pressure for season 2 to live up to season 1,
Yes. But
which I think I've heard won't be out till 2027.
I know. But even if it doesn't, I'm just so grateful that we had this moment in time at the end of this
Yeah,
year
I agree.
to just let us have some joy for freaking once. Ben, you know what's remarkable is that you were on this podcast 2 years ago. I was like literally like preparing for hours before you came on because I was so nervous. And now we have sat here for an hour and a half talking about just this amazing gay show. I'm so grateful that you came on. I'm so grateful that you took so long to chat with me and go into all these details. Before we hop off, tell everyone where they can find you and your work ahead of the Australian Open. Your like I
Yes.
mentioned at the beginning, your chart topping, speaking of topping, your chart topping Substack bounces. Where can they find it?
Yes, I've topped many times happily this year on Substack at least, and yeah. So finally got to number 1 there after a lot of waiting. I hit like number 2, like maybe like 8, 9 times this year. I never got to number 1. Was behind various different number 1s, and finally had a relatively, not even my biggest day in terms of, this is self indulgent, but it's like number of subscribers you get that day, like paid ones largely, who put you on this sort of 24-hour chart of like, they refresh every 24 hours. And I had one day, yeah, in December, after the combination of the Alcaraz Ferrero split and
Mm,
Naomi splitting with her agent Stuart Duguid, that those two stories back to back days, that got me over the top. And I think it was honestly a slow day for everybody else if I was number 1 that day, but I'll take it.
shut up.
Yes, that's it. Bounces. I'm talking about benrothenberg.com. You can check it out. You can read my thoughts on the terrible not life affirming, not great. It's Battle of the Sexes that just happened over the weekend. None of the very opposite viewing experience to Heated Rivalry in terms of feelings and positivity towards it. Not everything is all light and joy in this world, sadly. So that's there. I'll be in Australia, and hopefully I'll see you on tour somewhere this year, Tony. I saw you
Yes.
in Paris this year, which was great, and hopefully you're going to be somewhere around in some capacity as fan or media.
Ooh,
Great.
yes, I know. Hopefully media. Yeah, I definitely would love to meet up again at one of the tournaments. We shall see. Yeah, follow Ben. What is your handle for Twitter and Instagram?
Instagram, I am at Ben Rothenberg Writes, WRITES Writes, and Twitter at Ben Rothenberg, and Blue Sky also Ben Rothenberg .bsky, whatever that is. So similar handles
Awesome.
everywhere. So thank you very much, Tony, and congratulations on your success. I said at the beginning too, but like I am very happy that you are. I don't know how long you've been doing the show before I came out at the first time, but you're sticking with it and growing and blossoming in all these wonderful ways and building this thing that keeps getting bigger and better and making good off-season content too, which is not easy in tennis. So you have a lot going for you. So thank you for having me again. It's
Oh
been a
my
delight to
gosh.
visit your lovely rainbow logo painted home.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much as I sit in my parents' basement. But anyways, yeah, no, I really appreciate you saying that. And yeah, if you all want to follow along in this rainbow painted room, come find me on Instagram at the Gay Tennis Pod or Twitter at the same handle. And until next time, thank you so much, Ben, and we will see y'all soon.